Okay, so one of the most controversial lifts that I talk about is the Jefferson curl, but it really doesn't need to be that way because at the end of the day, it's not that scary. Like, I like to lift big weights just to explore what's possible because, you know, no one's done it before. So we need data on, you know, what's actually possible and know what's safe. You know, how are coaches going to know what to give their athletes if they don't have, you know, some idea of what's possible? It's not a full scientific controlled study, obviously, but if you know what one guy can do without hurting his back, you have some idea what you can push him for. But ultimately, the Jefferson curl is just a weighted pike stretch, so it doesn't have to involve any kind of crazy weight. Really, you can just do the stretch. You can just do a stretch unweighted. That's how I actually recommend people start. Just try to explore the movement with just your body. Just practice rounding your neck down, then your shoulders. Our goal here is to sequentially round every vertebra separately. That's the goal. Obviously, it's not going to happen in all cases, but we're trying to get each vertebra down, rounded down separately in order. Folding our shoulders down, trying to round every vertebra. Bending down into a pike stretch. And then coming back up the same way, trying to sequentially extend every vertebra back up to the top. And you can just play around with that movement with just your body weight, you know. If you feel any issues, maybe go get checked out by a PT or something. If you have any injuries, definitely go get checked out. But if that feels good, you can add a little bit of weight. You could go all the way up to an empty barbell. That's what I have, so that's what I'm going to do here. But I mean, really, you can do a lot. You can do a lot less than this. When I taught my mom, who's 73 now, when I taught my mom how to do it, I just gave her a 3-pound dumbbell and just had her use that 3-pound dumbbell, and that worked just fine. My dad's kind of an ego lifter like me, so he used the barbell. But anyway, point being, we're going to use a lightweight. So this is an empty bar, and I think this is a good weight for a strong guy who hasn't practiced these, but you know is generally strong. An empty 45-pound bar will work fine. All we're going to do is get a good standard deadlift grip to start. We're going to do the same thing. We're just going to round, starting at the head, rounding the shoulders over, just trying to slowly, deliberately get as much spinal segmentation as we can. Go all the way down into a deep hamstring stretch. Try to actively compress with your abs to get as deep of a stretch as you can. Don't bounce like I'm doing here. I'm just kind of demonstrating that I'm using my abs and hip flexors to pull into a deeper stretch. And then round back up. And at first, we're not worried about sets and reps here. We're just worried about movement quality and just getting a good stretch. We're trying to just really focus on, are we segmenting each portion of the spine? Are we really mobilizing that spine through this top portion? And then are we getting a good hamstring stretch at the bottom? Okay. So that's really all it is. It's not nearly as intimidating as some people have made it out to be. Should you do it if you already have a back injury? No, you should go get checked out. Now, some PTs will assign it once they've checked you out and assessed your, your injury, and they may determine that it's appropriate for your condition. But if you're already injured, don't just go do Jefferson curls. But if you're healthy, it's a wonderful way to strengthen the back. I mean, I would say this is the premier exercise for the spinal erectors. I don't think any other exercise will give more development for the spinal erectors. It's also wonderful for the hamstrings and glutes, especially glutes. You get a different kind of stretch that you don't really get in a whole lot of other exercises for the glutes. And you get a lot of benefit out of even this empty bar, you know. I recommend people stick with the empty bar for, at least a month, just to give your body time to adapt to the new movement. It may seem a little bit too slow to some, but this isn't like the bench press where you want to go add 5-10 pounds each time. You want to give your body time to adapt, then you can gradually start adding weight. I wouldn't recommend big jumps, 5 pounds here, 5 pounds there, and eventually you can work your way up to bigger weights. Now, what I demonstrated probably isn't what you, sorry about that. What I just demonstrated probably isn't what you're used to seeing if you've seen me on social media. You've probably seen something like this. When I do Jefferson curls in my own training, I typically use the Zercher hold. And by the way, I'll cover the Zercher position a little bit more later. But this position with the bar and the elbows is just called the Zercher position. You can use it for a lot of different exercises. And it's not an inherent part of the Jefferson curl. It's just a different way of holding the bar. So I'm going to do the same movement, starting with the head, shoulders, spine, down into a good stretch, and rounding back up. And the reason I do that is so I don't have to come and deadlift the bar up. Let's say this is 225 pounds or so. I'm not gonna add the weight to demonstrate right now, but you know, you can imagine I just picked up 225, now I have to step up. Now I'm on a box this is a very sturdy box, by the way, but you know, a lot aren't. Now it could be wobbling. Now I have to worry about you know, lowering a heavy weight all the way down. Now I have to worry about are my thumbs gonna get pinched or anything like that. So bottom line, there's just a lot more inconvenience. So once you go up to heavier weights, I do recommend switching to the Zercher hold. That being said, the reason I demonstrated the standard deadlift grip is I do think it's a little bit better for helping you to learn to really reach with your shoulders and get a little bit more extension there. It's just more practical to use the Zercher hold with heavier loads. Now the Jefferson curl is not the be-all end-all of mobility. Obviously there are plenty of other exercises that you're going to need to do if you want to maximize, you know, your hamstring flexibility, even your spinal mobility, including some Jefferson curl variations and other exercises. But it's kind of a good it's a good exercise that does a lot of different things at once. If there's one, you know, exercise, you know, for the spine and the hamstrings that you want to throw in to just get more range, durability, as well as hypertrophy for those areas, Jefferson curl is a pretty good pick. Okay, so recently Zercher style lifts have become popular, but there's a little bit of confusion over what they are, like whether it's one exercise or multiple exercises. So all the Zercher style lift really is a lift with the barbell and the crooks of the elbows. It's just a position, kind of like the front rack for a front squat, back rack for a back squat. That's really all it is. And this was invented by Ed Zercher, a strongman, and I believe the 20s or 30s, sometime around then. Didn't have access to a squat rack or anything, so this was the position that he invented to do squats. Okay. But it's kind of a versatile position that you can use for a lot of different purposes. It tends to get, on some cases people are afraid of it because it's uncomfortable initially, and other people tend to just kind of hype it up a little bit and just make it this, just Zercher everything. Like Zerchers are the secret to, you know, gains, is being hardcore and whatnot. At the end of the day, all the Zercher position really is functionally shortening the length of your arms. So you're holding a barbell, but your arms are shorter. So is that pointless? No. Is it a game changer? Maybe. It gives you some different options, and you know, unlocks a lot of options that you might not have otherwise, or might be really inconvenient otherwise. So obviously one benefit to having your arms shorter is you can do deficits more easily. Instead of having to sit up on a really high platform, try to negotiate getting down to a barbell and whatnot to do deficit deadlifts, because I mean, in reality, if we're doing a conventional deadlift, we're really not working any of the involved muscles through their full range of motion. I'm not bashing the conventional deadlift. It's a wonderful exercise, obviously. But I mean, if you look into it, you know, we've got a lot more range here, right? So, I mean, we could set up an extreme deficit, or we could just shorten our arms. And that's, I think, a lot more practical if we're trying to, you know, really use more extreme deficits practically. So we could do a Zercher deadlift if we want to do an extreme deficit deadlift. And that means we're going to hook the barbell in the crooks of our arms on the ground. So the key here, you really want to get it, you really want to get set nicely in the crooks of your elbows. If it's too far up on the forearm, it's going to want to slide out. That's going to be the case with all of these. And then we're simply going to do a deadlift. So obviously the advantages here, we're taking all the muscles involved through a fuller range of motion. We're getting some round back training, not as much maybe as in the Jefferson curl, but still quite a lot. We're getting a lot of good work for our hamstrings and everything. We're actually getting a little bit more work for our lats, I think, than in the conventional deadlift, because they're having to work actively to pull the bar back in to your body. They're going through some range of motion. In some ways, it's a little bit like a flexion row, If you're familiar with those, you get a little bit of that action, but obviously with a heavy weight, right? But basically we're just dealing with a much longer range deadlift. So that's obviously a very good developmental tool. Now, should everyone do Zercher deadlifts? Absolutely not. Obviously, if you have a back injury, talk to a PT before you do that. But my rule of thumb, if you want to do Zercher deadlifts safely, I don't think that you should train them hard, certainly not max out. If you have any trouble just getting down into that start position easily, you know? So if you're, obviously you can't even get down there, because that's where I was at one point. I literally could not even get into this position whatsoever. Obviously you can't train them. You could put the plates on a block or something. I'd recommend just doing very light Jefferson curls or something like that to improve your range of motion. Now, if you can get into position, but you have to really like pull yourself, you're really wedging yourself under the bar, and it's a struggle. I mean, maybe you can go light on them, and that'll help to loosen you up, but I really wouldn't recommend maxing out or using it as a max effort exercise. However, once you get to the point where you can just bend down, hook your elbows, no problem, then we can start to push it a little bit. And if you can just get into position and do it, okay, now we can push a little bit. I'm still gonna tend to recommend a little bit higher reps, lower weight. I'm not saying you can't max out on it. Everyone loves to max out on Zercher deadlifts, but you know, I mean, what exercise is safer when we try to do max outs instead of doing reps, right? And obviously for developmental purposes, I think, you know, reps are better, but that's the case with all exercises, right? Nothing new there. So yeah, so that's the Zercher deadlift. A much more accessible option is gonna be what's called the full Zercher cycle. And this is actually what Ed Zercher would do. In that, we're gonna do either a sumo or conventional deadlift. I think most people prefer to do a sumo deadlift like this, like kind of a mild sumo. You're not gonna be doing competition sumo, that won't work. Like a kind of a mild hybrid sumo. Kind of like you're lifting up a stone if you have a strongman background. Just placing the bar on the knees and then hooking like so. Personally, I've always preferred to use just my regular conventional deadlift. Lift the bar all the way up. That way, I can place the bar down on my knees exactly where I want. I set my stance exactly like I want. I have a lot of control over where I'm putting the bar on my knees. Hook under you. You're in a very stable position here. It's gonna take a little bit of practice, but you're in a stable position. You have some time, especially if you're gonna be doing a higher rep set. You wanna make sure you set your elbows exactly where you want them. And then you do a Zercher squat up. Now, as far as the Zercher squat, there are two options. Typically, when you're doing it off the ground like this, it's gonna be a little bit more of a hybrid movement, a little bit of a hybrid hinge squat, not a pure squat. So your hips will generally shoot up, and then you extend your hips through, like so. Generally, when you see anyone going for a really heavy weight, especially like a world record, everyone's gonna do it like that. It's gonna be kind of that hinge squat hybrid. So we're gonna be leading with our hips a little bit, continuing to press up and then shooting our hips through. That's usually how people are gonna lift the most weight, and that's a valid training choice. The other option for Zercher squats is obviously just to keep your torso very upright and do a very upright squat. And the Zercher position really allows for this. You can really make it a quad-focused upright squat. It's a lot like a front squat in this case. Either one's valid. It's all about your, your training priorities. If you do the heavier, more hybrid squat, you're gonna get a little bit more upper back out of it. It still will work the quads a little bit differently. You're getting less tension at the bottom. Actually, a lot more tension at the top, because you're still gonna be struggling to kind of get under and then drive through. It's almost like a hack deadlift if you're familiar with those. Probably overall, the more upright squat is gonna be favorable for pure quad development. I mean, obviously it's just an easy way to keep your torso really upright, make it quad dominant. And I mean, you could use heel elevation if you need to, but typically the upright style of Zercher squat allows pretty much anybody to do fairly upright squats, even if they lack the mobility for, you know, a very upright back squat or front squat. So those are two of the most common applications of Zercher squats. Now that being said, the position itself can be used for any number of things. I mean, pretty much anything you're doing out here. We don't have a rack. Well, what's up? Oh, I'm getting the pet in, okay. All right, we're cool now, all right. Anyway, yeah, I mean, we're out here without a rack. We just have a barbell. Obviously, the Zercher is a great way to just go ahead and do whatever you want, you know. We can do, you know, lunges if we want. You know, we can do pretty much whatever. Obviously, there's a lot of utility to it there. Okay, so what else can we use the Zercher position for? Well, it helps to put the center of gravity of the bar in front of you, which can have some useful applications. For example, Cossack squats. For a lot of people that don't have the ankle or hip mobility to do Cossack squats with just their body weight, they may actually find that using the Zercher position allows them to do Cossacks even with extra load. That's changed center of gravity allows Cossacks to be performed more easily. Check it out. See how the bar is drifting out in front of me now? That just gives me a little bit of assistance in maintaining balance so I can do a movement that would normally be a little bit outside of my range of motion, right? And there are a number of applications for that. I've seen people do pistols. I'm not going to try that right now. I'd probably embarrass myself. But you get the idea. It can be useful to have center of gravity out to the front. Now, does that mean you should do everything in Zercher style? Not necessarily. I've seen some people try Romanian deadlifts, for example, that way. I never do it that way. I don't see the point, you know? I mean, if I was going to hold it in my hands, you know, the bar is not going to come anywhere near the ground anyway. So I don't really need to shorten my arms for that. So why would I ever do RDLs in the Zercher position? It doesn't really make that much sense. That being said, you know, maybe some people have some, you know, some reasons for it, and that's fine. But anyway, it's a valuable utility position that you can do a lot of stuff with once you are acclimated to it. And that's kind of the elephant in the room, right? A lot of people find that the Zercher position is extremely uncomfortable on the elbows, right? That's kind of the main complaint. You know, I can't do this, my elbows hurt. Well, for everyone who says that, I would just ask you, do you remember how bad back squats felt when you first tried them? Do you remember how bad front squats felt when you first tried them? Hell, they still feel terrible to me. Front squats, pretty uncomfortable, right? As with everything, your body acclimates to the point where it's comfortable. I mean, for me, personally, this is extremely comfortable now. It's really no more uncomfortable than a back squat just because I've acclimated. And just, you know, practicing it is enough to acclimate, but there are a couple ways to speed that process up. I think just really just speed run you through that process. That if you do frequent Zercher carries as part of your training, thank you. That's going to speed run your elbow acclimation. And then to just kind of bulletproof that whole thing, one arm Zerchers for a heavy overload just really make you feel no pain. It's like, I mean, honestly, I haven't done back squats in a while. Honestly, if I put the bar on my back for back squats, it'd probably be a little bit more uncomfortable for me right now than Zerchers would, just because I've been doing them more frequently. So I can even try to work up to a heavy one-arm Zercher if I feel like that. Yeah, I feel like that'd be cool. And I do think there's training value in it, just in terms of building that acclimation. Because I mean, you can work up to like way more on one arm than you can on the other arms, or on two arms. So you know, once you do like way more than your max, you're not going to feel any pain. It's going to be like fully comfortable, no issues whatsoever. I can even do an overhead drop for fun. I'm not going to go heavy on that though. I don't want to hurt myself. That's stupid. Okay, so were you filming?
Yeah, but
oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I was just talking, but yeah, I'll go ahead and start now. Okay, so if you want to acclimate your elbows quickly to the discomfort of Zercher squats and get them to the point where you feel no discomfort, my number one recommendation is just to do Zercher walks. Okay, so all you're going to do on a Zercher walk Just pick up the barbell, whichever way you like. I'm demonstrating the normal way. Just get into your Zercher hold. Just take a walk with it. Whatever distance you like. Probably not too far. I mean, we're not gonna walk around the neighborhood necessarily. Although I guess you could, I mean, why not? But typically the way I recommend you do this, like when you're doing heavy pulls from the ground, it's your deadlift day, strip off some weight to the point where it's comfortable. Just carry the bar back to the weight tree, and then you can put the bar down for the weight tree and unload it. That way you're saving yourself a little bit of time. Now you can easily unload the bar right by the weight tree. Just do that every time you deadlift, and you're gonna build up some acclimation. Nothing too crazy, nothing heavy, nothing max out. Just build up acclimation that way. That's a really good tip. Once you feel pretty good as far as acclimation, you really want to just finalize that process. Get your elbows to the point where they feel no pain. Like doing Zercher variations is easily as comfortable, if not more so, than the back rack. Okay, here's how you bulletproof your elbows for that. One arm variations, okay? So you can do a full one arm deadlift, one arm Zercher deadlift like this. I'll probably cover regular one arm deadlifts in a second, but basically just get the bar centered. I don't have it taped off here, but it's more or less center. Brace up on your knee, get a good hook under here, and simply lift up, okay? That's the full deadlift variation. If you don't want to do that, you can do the one arm squat variation. If you want to be a showman, you can lift with one hand, or you can simply place the bar on your knees, hook with one arm, and do a squat. And if you do that, you'll be able to work up to well over your max with two arms, and that's gonna fully acclimate your elbows, build excess capacity, and you're just never gonna feel any issues with Zerchers on your elbows anymore. A lot of people back in the day would say that the Zercher squat is pointless because it's a squat that's limited by the strength of your arms. It's absolutely not true. I can go to absolute failure in my legs and my arms can still hold the weight. I can lift far more. I can lift, well over half my max with one arm. I've done up to 360 in the one arm Zercher. I definitely can't do like 700 pounds in the two arm Zercher. So the arms are not going to be a limiting factor. It's really all about just combating that discomfort and just getting acclimated. Now, on the flip side of that, you'll see a lot of people say that Zerchers build biceps. I'm afraid to tell you that they do not. As you can see, this is not my strongest body part. I've done many, many, many Zerchers over the years. You would think if they were going to build biceps, at some point they would have started. That is a myth. They will not build your biceps, I'm sorry. All right, let me, I don't want to mess up your bar, but it is something that I want to teach people if they're, if they're trying to get good at these. One hand deadlift you can get away with. You start getting into like one hand snatch, one hand clean, anything that requires a little bit more.
You don't want to slip.
Accurate. Well, and you want to know exactly where dead center is. You can miss with some of these. You're gonna burn so much energy on missed lifts trying to get the exact center. Yeah, you just need to have an actual reference point for balance. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter as much on the. Actually, if you want to film this, that might actually be a good way for me to talk about it. Okay, so when we're doing one-hand lifts, it's really important to know exactly where the center of the bar is. Some people, squat you, sorry, I'm getting over a cold, I'm sorry. Think that you can just tense your core to keep a one-arm lift stabilized, but the reality is you have to grip in the center, and it can be kind of hard to figure out where the center is. Now, obviously, if you have center knurling, that will work. But for some of these, that's gonna tear up your hand. So what I recommend doing is taping the bar. So what I'm doing right now is I'm measuring the center of the bar, trying to figure out where the exact center is so that I have something that I can tape. Let's see, we're gonna get to, 17 inches. So between right here, let's edit this part out where I'm struggling. Yeah, all right, there we go. All right. Yeah. All right. Let's see. Shoot, you don't want to get taped up. Some bug was trying to get itself taped. All right. 7 inches right there. All right. All right. Yeah, so now I'm taping off the exact center, and that's going to give me a frame of reference. It's going to let me know exactly where to grip the bar. That way you don't have to hunt around for your balance on the one-hand lifts, because you can easily lose a lot of lifts by just being a little bit off. So it's much better to know exactly what you're going for. Let's test that out. Okay. Okay, there we go. Okay, so now I'm going to teach the one-hand deadlift, which is an excellent exercise by itself, and it's also a wonderful foundation for more one-arm lifts, like one-arm snatches, one-arm cleans, even one-arm zerchers. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is set up properly. Now, what you might be tempted to do is just set up like a conventional deadlift, assume your conventional deadlift stance, reach down and go. There's a problem with that. And the problem is that if you do that, the bar is going to want to drift over to the side that you're lifting with, right? So I'm lifting with my right hand. The bar is actually not going to be balanced. It's going to immediately want to drift over. So what we actually want to do is offset our stance a little bit. We're going to offset to the side that we're lifting so that the bar is basically in balance. And we're going to test that by just lifting it off the ground, right? If it lifts straight, that's fine. See, if I'm actually centered up, look. See how it shifted? So we don't want that. We want to just go ahead with any of these one-hand lifts, set up a little bit off center so the bar's in its natural balance point, and we can always test that, okay? So if we're doing pretty much any of these one-handed lifts, we're going to want to use hook grip. If you're familiar with Olympic lifting, you'll know hook grip. You're gripping first with the thumb, running the thumb under the bar. I'm trying to show here, it's a little awkward, but you can see how my thumb's running under the bar, and then I'm wrapping my fingers over it, okay? And for me, I'm mostly wrapping my first 3 fingers over. And what that does is it prevents the bar from rolling out. I mean, you're going to need a ton of grip strength to work up to any serious numbers on one-hand lifts if you don't use this. So what we're going to do, we're just going to wrap our thumbs, wrap our fingers around the thumb, and now we have a nice, secure grip. Okay, so for the one-hand deadlift, we're going to use our offhand to brace on the knee. Some people will say this is cheating. It's not. Back when this was actually a competitive lift, this was part of the technique. It's perfectly fine. The goal here is to transmit the force of our entire body through one arm, right? So we're using everything that we have available, but we're only gripping with one arm, right? So we're going to brace on the knee, fingers facing inward. Get into a good stance. We're going to be a little bit more, I think we're going to be a little bit more squatted down, a little bit more knees bent on this variation than would typically be seen with a conventional deadlift. That's okay. There's going to be a little bit more quad drive to get us started, and we're also going to lower our lifting side shoulder just a little bit. Not crazy. We're not doing a side bend here, but it's going to be a little bit lower. You can play around with it and find what's optimal for you. And we're going to simply brace up, breathe and brace just as we always would. Use some quad drive to break the bar off the ground, and then drive through. All right. Now, with one-hand deadlifts, when you get to any significant weight, it's going to be extremely challenging to get a complete powerlifting style decisive lockout like you would see in a two-hand deadlift, and that's not required for the lift. According to the actual rules when it used to be a competitive lift, all you really had to do was get it to knee height or higher with your legs straight, and then hold for the judge's down command. So if I just lock out to, this is a little bit over knees. Now I've straightened my legs. Now I wait for the judge's command. It's okay if it bends down, if it dips down a little bit. It doesn't have to be level. Just the center has to be at or above knee height, and you have to hold for the judge's command. It doesn't have to be completely locked out. All right. Now, there's 2 ways we can do this. I just demonstrated the conventional stance. you can also do the straddle stance. In that stance, we're simply straddling the bar. What that does is make lockouts a little bit simpler. In my opinion, it doesn't look as cool. You probably break the same weight off the ground in both cases, but when doing the straddle stance, you're going to be able to lock out a little bit more decisively. Same thing applies. We're using hook grip. We're still using the offset stance. My hand is a little bit closer to my lifting side foot than to my other foot. We're still going to breathe and brace and use, on this variation, even more quad drive. And we're simply going to extend to lockout. I think that variation is typically a little bit easier. One thing that people have trouble with, people find that it's a little bit harder to set the hook grip when using that that straddle style. So what you may want to do is kind of come in, with your body straight in towards the bar, get your hook grip set this way, and then switch into straddle style. A lot of people find that helpful. I always screw this up. I always try to get it closer to my body, thinking that's going to give me an advantage, and it doesn't. So let me actually try to do it right this time. Okay. If it's something like the Jefferson curl, it's going to be more of a like, do as I say, not as I do. Am I pushing the boundary? Sure. Am I also in every post, telling people how they should start so as not to hurt themselves? Yeah. I mean, like I'm not telling anybody to go out there and lift 300 pounds with a rounded spine. This is stuff that obviously could be very dangerous if someone just tries to do something they're not prepared for. And I'm not even saying that everybody should be doing what I'm doing. I mean, I'm kind of seeing myself as a test dummy for some of this stuff, because some of the stuff just has not been explored. So, part of the value I can provide is just test it out, be some data for other people to work off of. That being said, like you look into the Jefferson curl, for example, I showed that to both my parents who are in their 70s. So I believe in it. I think it can be performed safely by anybody who's healthy. They're healthy. They don't have any back injuries, but obviously, they're not as young as they used to be. Good shape. But, I believe in the safety of any exercise that I'm going to advocate for. Just load management is the key. No. Oh my goodness, no. I actually, this is crazy because I don't normally do this. I'm pretty bad about this sort of thing normally, but I actually followed my own advice in the Jefferson curl. I actually started with the empty bar. I stuck with it. I progressed up slowly. My first jump was the 2.5 pound plates on the empty bar. I actually did the right thing. Because at that time I had no idea that it could even be pushed like this. I'd only ever seen it used as a lightweight mobility exercise, or fairly light. Not I'm not saying everyone was going light, but it was mostly in the mobility space. It wasn't seen as like a heavy strength exercise. It certainly wasn't seen as a bodybuilding exercise. So I had no idea about that. Now it turns out it was. This is an interesting thing. Maybe I can cover that later, but I'll just go into it now. It turns out, and I found this out recently, it was actually very popular in the silver era. It was just known under a different name. They just called it stiff leg deadlifts. And I mean, we hear stiff leg deadlift, we think, okay, that's a stiff leg deadlift. No, they were doing exactly what I showed earlier, standing on a platform with a barbell, doing a Jefferson curl. Now the name Jefferson curl actually came about later, I think. That was not what it was originally called. But yeah, according to John Grimek, the stiff leg deadlift, and by which he meant the Jefferson curl, was actually favored by bodybuilders over the conventional deadlift because they felt it had a better effect on building the muscles. So, but I didn't know all this then. So yeah, I played it straight. I used lightweight, focused on really good form, and I moved up slowly and just gradually. After a while, I felt like, you know what? This feels pretty safe. Maybe I can push it a little more. It felt crazy when I first worked up to 135. It's like, oh, is this dangerous? I don't know. And then, I was like, okay, maybe I can push this. Can I do 185? I did 185. Wow, that's crazy. I didn't break, And a couple, weeks later, the inkling came. Maybe it was a couple months. I don't know. I'm telling a story. I'm not looking at my calendar, but a little while later, I say, could I do 2 plates? Could I do 225? oh wow, I did it, I didn't break. Oh, you know, a little while goes by, I want to make a video on Jefferson curls, want to show off for the gram. Oh man, you think I could hit 275? Let me try it. I didn't break, wow, you know, so it's just kind of like, it went up from there, and, you know, eventually I worked up to some fairly big weights. I never had any idea that it was going to go that far, but yeah, I actually did work up slowly, and it took me years to get to the point where I'm at. So that is definitely what I recommend everybody else do, because I will promise you I would have hurt myself badly if I just jumped into it fast. I was already fairly strong at that time, but I would have hurt myself, no question, if I hadn't worked up slowly. So that's why I recommend a very slow, conservative approach. And I don't think anybody necessarily needs to go up into the, into the 300s. I think there's a ton of benefit to be had just under 100 pounds. I mean, if you're just doing Jefferson curls, with the empty bar, you'll get some benefit. If you work up to slowly, gradually to 95 pounds, you will get benefit. If you work up into the 100s, like, you will see visible back development. You don't need to go heavy. You'll see visible back development with, working up into the 100s for, for good, clean, consistent, reps, good form. But then, if you've pushed it a couple years, you're ready. Now you start working to a little bit higher intensities. Maybe you cross that 200-pound barrier, a little bit higher intensity, a little bit closer to failure. I mean, you're going to see back development. But does anyone need to go super heavy? Probably not. But, what I do think is, if I'm pushing that boundary, if I'm lifting really heavy, that's a little bit of a margin of error for people to look at and say, okay, well, he did this safely. Okay, where in that spectrum is the right balance of risk to reward? How heavy should I have my athletes go? They don't need to go that heavy, but my guys are wrestlers. They need to be able to deal with heavy weights in strange positions. So maybe I can get my wrestlers doing 225 after a long working up period. Let me work my wrestlers up to sets with 225, and that's kind of how I see it. So I'm not telling everyone to go out and lift as heavy as I do, but I do want to provide data that can help people make that decision for themselves. You know what I mean? Okay, so I feel like that was a pretty good speech on that one. Let me see how this goes before I lose my warm up. God, this looks heavy. Oh man. All right. Should be good for at least 315. I started just during lockdowns. I just went out. My kid had just been born. It's lockdown. I had a little bit of time. I just go out and do workout in whatever I happen to be wearing, and it just stuck. And now I'm sponsored by Rascal, so that's where we're at with that. But I mean, it just kind of became kind of a calling card. I didn't plan for it to be that way, but it became kind of a thing. And a little bit cynically, it's something where I know people are gonna, for a while people would comment, why are you doing it in jeans? So it's like, okay, well, that's guaranteed algorithm. But it started out just what was convenient, and I like it, and then just kind of became my thing, so now I do it.
Why do you like the 5-finger shoes?
Oh, they're absolutely the best. I actually went on a trip to Hawaii, and I was wearing water shoes because obviously it's Hawaii, and I was like, you know what? Hiking's a lot more fun in these. Let me get into the barefoot thing. Bought some, never went back. I mean, they just, they let your toes move, especially when you get on muddy ground or like slippery, steep slopes. Like, you really feel your toes hunting for purchase, opening up to give you a little bit of stability. I mean, I hike with my toddlers all the time. Sometimes I'll have one in the carrier, even one on my shoulders. Like, these shoes have helped me maintain my footing in conditions where I guarantee I would have fallen with my kids. Not that I'm trying to take risks, but you think a patch of dirt is safe, and then it turns out to be a lot more slippery than you thought. I guarantee these shoes have saved me from falling with my kids, so I'm hooked on them. And I think they're just, they are going to develop your you know, your foot in a lot of ways. When I first started wearing them, I felt a lot of muscles I didn't even know I had. You know, eventually those got stronger, so I think there's a lot of benefit to them. Let me get the other 45. What are my most impressive lifts? I mean, I would say definitely for me, not necessarily in terms of the weight, but in terms of the fact that I worked up to being able to do Jefferson curls with over 300 pounds where, you know, I'm actually touching the plates to the floor, straight legs. I mean, that, for me, because it's not just the weight, I had to do a bunch of, you know, mobility work. Jefferson curls are not a one-stop shop for mobility. I had to do a bunch of stuff beside that. I had to do a bunch of stuff to train my, you know, my abs, hip flexors, all that, you know, build a lot of capabilities that I didn't previously have. So it wasn't just brute strength. So I would say that would be, in my opinion, the most impressive lifts, and I think a lot of the fitness industry would agree, since that's what I got the most attention for. But it's not just purely lifting. There were a bunch of capabilities that I had to build. I mean, you know, a couple of years ago, I was a completely immobile meathead squat, bench, and deadlift guy. So to be able to display that level of flexibility, I mean, it's a lot of progress for me personally. All right, we will see. No problem. If it is a problem, then I'm having a bad day. All right.
You got it. Here we go. Money.
All right. Whew. All right. That one, figured I'd get. I want to get a PR for you. It's kind of an obscure PR. I'm having to dig into some weird stuff, but I want to get a PR here. This one is actually a competitive lift in USAWA, but I mean, that means, like, what that actually means in practice is, like, you know, 10 people have ever competed in it. So this is not like there's a book on technique.
Come on, you can do it. Yeah, got it. Come on, come on.
Damn.
You even adjusted your glasses mid.
Yeah.
Like mid lift.
Now I'm trying to think, I screwed up the technique on this a couple times before.
I think you need more weight.
Okay. If I can do this. All right.
Come on, you can do it.
Shit. No, I can't.
Amazing.
Well,
Amazing effort.
but let me actually have something cool, something successful, not to, as a proof of concept. Actually, I don't want to waste. I mean, what kind of timetable are we on here? Because I don't want to burn too much time. Are we on a?
If you just wanted to hit one more thing quick, that would be fine.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, you want to do like 275 or something.
We'll see if yeah, we'll see what let me strip off a little bit of weight and see what variation feels like it's gonna work best for me. Because I could do the full deadlift from the ground, or I could do the Zercher clean. Either one would be kind of fun. Let me just see which one feels like it's gonna be better. I mean, I think either one. Yeah, I'll need them for that. Let's see which one's feeling better today. God damn it, man. All right, let's see how this one feels.
There you go.
Hey. All right. Actually, probably go with that. May need to strip off another plate, but it's, yeah, nah.
Okay.
Let me go up to the. Let me get up to the 25s on there. I'll just hit 315, call it good. Not a PR, but pretty decent.
Of that one arm move you just did?
Yeah, yeah. I can't go as heavy on the full deadlift from the floor, but 315 is decent, I guess. And you know, it makes more. It actually is easier than the two-hand version. There was actually a time when, you know, when I first started my mobility journey, when I could not get all the way down for the two-hand Zercher deadlift. I just could not get my elbows under there. But because there's a little bit of a rotational quality, I was actually able to start working the one-hand variation before I could do the two-hand. Obviously, I think once you get there, the two-hand version is probably going to be a more practical overall bodybuilding exercise. I really think it's great for bodybuilding once you get into it, but there's definitely a movement prerequisite there. But yeah, the one-hand version does have some application. It's actually a little bit more accessible in some cases. All right.
Yep.
All right. All right.